Oh, yeah. Episode number 43, Sports and Shorts of Sorts. My name's Rencity, Rennie Rickay, and thanks for coming along. We'll do what we do in every episode, and we'll start with our jersey mentions. But little bit of a different jersey mention, acknowledgement, whatever you'd like to call it. A little different start to this episode. I'm going to start with a car number. Yeah, a little different. Well, this is perhaps one of the most recognizable number 43s out there. I'm talking about Richard Petty, the King, who's the first driver to win the Cup Series 7 times. Record now tied with Dale Earnhardt and Jimmy Johnson. Petty was also a record 200 races during his career, including the Daytona 500, a record 7 times, and winning a record 27 races in one season back in 1967. That's crazy. He garners so much respect from anyone involved in racing, and many consider him the best driver in the history of NASCAR. And he's still been very much involved with NASCAR as a team owner of GMS Racing, and a lot of people from his family have gotten involved in NASCAR. 97, Petty was inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, and in 2010, Petty was inducted into the first class of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. You knew he'd have to go into that one. 92, George Bush awarded the Medal of Freedom to Petty, becoming the first motorsports athlete to ever be honored with that award. But he's been involved in some crazy accidents too, as you would, being involved with racing as long as he has. 1970 at Darlington, his head actually hit the track pavement several times, and it led to NASCAR mandating the installation of the Petty developed safety net that covers the driver's side window. And then there was the accident he was involved in Pocono in 1980, left Petty with a broken neck. Injury he hid from NASCAR officials so he could continue racing. You know, the man was fearless, and he'll always be remembered for what he's done for motorsports. So, Richard Petty, we're starting with a car here, but we'll leave the racetrack. We'll go with the ball diamond. Number 43 that comes to mind, Dennis Eckersley. He's one of those pitchers that started as a starter before going to the reliever role, and Eckersley got his start with the Cleveland Indians, as they were called then. He had a great start, earning AL Rookie Pitcher of the Year. A few years later, he'd throw the only no-hitter of his career, make the All-Star game. Then he'd get traded to the Red Sox, where he'd have a few good seasons, winning a career-high 20 games and having another All-Star game. But then he'd get moved to the Cubs, where he struggled a bit. And at one point, he'd check himself into rehab to treat alcoholism. And then he'd get traded again, this time to the Oakland Athletics. And manager Tony La Russa, they moved Eck to that setup role, and before the closer. But then Jay Howell would get injured, and that opened the door for Eckersley to take that role. And once he got that, he became one of the most dominant closers in the game, setting a then record 45 saves. And in Oakland, Eckersley was shrined, He'd make another 4 All-Star teams, leading the MLB in saves twice. In 88, he'd win the ALCS MVP. Athletics would come up short on winning the World Series, but they'd make up for it the following year when they'd sweep the Giants to win. And his best season came in 92 when he won the AL Cy Young and the AL MVP, becoming only the third reliever to win the MVP. The other two at that time was Rollie Fingers, spoke about in episode 34, and Willie Hernandez. So Eckersley would wind up finishing his career as a Cardinal before one more stint in Boston. And he's one of 2 people to win 20 games in one season, as well as 50 saves in another. The only other person is John Smoltz, who we highlighted in episode 29. Eckersley has his number 43 retired by the Athletics. He's in their Hall of Fame, as well as the Red Sox. He was inducted to the Baseball Hall of Fame, first ballot. One of the best sidearm pitchers to ever play the game. If you look at his release, it's an interesting one. We'll go from the diamond to the hardwood. Start with a big man whose game might have been a little ahead of its time. I'm talking about the smooth shooting Jack Sikma. He didn't go to any big name universities, even though they were trying to. He would end up being swayed by his close relationship to coach Denny Bridges, who was able to bring Sikma to Illinois Wesleyan University, a school in the NAIA rather than the NCAA. So this way Sikma could play as a freshman because the NCAA didn't allow freshmen to play. So this caused him to drop in the draft a bit, even though he was still selected 8th overall by the Seattle Supersonics. He was a great fit right away in the NBA, and he'd make the NBA All-Rookie team. That Sonics team would make to the finals and lose to the Bullets, but the following season, when Sigma was an All-Star, his first one, the Supersonics would get back to the finals in a rematch with the Bullets, and this time Seattle would win in 5 games. So they got the championship there. And then the following year, as defending champions, they'd win 56 games, but they'd lose to eventual champions, LA Lakers. But man, was he good as a Supersonic, making 7 All-Star games, NBA All-Defensive second team. And after a few seasons of missing the playoffs, he's like, I want out. So he got shipped to the Bucks, where he'd make the playoffs the rest of his career. Never getting back to the finals, though. At one point with the Bucks, Sigma set a then record, 51 games without a free throw miss. Like I said, a smooth shooting big man, like straight up. Is way ahead of his time. His legacy has been left on the game too. The 2 moves, Sigma 1 and Sigma 2, really named well. They're replicated and used and taught in all basketball camps around the world. After his retirement, his number 43 was retired by Seattle. Unfortunately, not there anymore. Hopefully, the Sonics can get back. I love those jerseys too. But anyway, he was inducted into the NAIA Hall of Fame for what he did in college, Small College Basketball Hall of Fame, and of course, he was inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Hell of a career, and like I said, a pioneer for big shooting big men, or good shooting big men. Well, we'll stick with the hardwood. Number 43, another great big man. I'm talking about Brad Daugherty. He was born in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and he dominated as a youngster, catching the eye of legendary North Carolina coach Dean Smith. So he'd get him to play at North Carolina, where he'd end up becoming one of the best big men ever to play at the heralded university. You know, a lot of good players go there. He averaged 20 points per game. And that would lead to the Cavs picking him with the number 1 overall pick in '86. He joined rookies Ron Harper, Mark Price, and John Hot Rod Williams. And wow, those guys clicked right out of there. Harper, Williams, Daugherty would make all rookie team. That's pretty wild to think 3 players would make the all rookie team. But anyway, Daugherty continued, like all in one team. But anyway, sorry. Daugherty continued to play at a high level, 5 All-Star games, All NBA third team, and that was a tough position to get on any All NBA teams at that time. But they'd get to the Eastern Conference Finals, and that Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, that is a 1-2 punch that was just lethal. But injuries suck, and late 80s or early 90s was a tough time to play in the Eastern Conference. And like I said, injuries suck, and Brad Daugherty would have back ones, which is not good for basketball. So at 28, he'd have to leave the game, which is brutal. And when he did, he was the all-time leading scorer and rebounder in Cavs history, but both of those belong to LeBron now. But his 43 is retired by the Cavs, and he was selected to the all-time Cavs team. He wore 42 at UNC, so he's got that number retired there. But yeah, he thrived as a broadcaster for the NBA, and being from Carolina, he loves NASCAR. And they say the reasoning for him wearing 43 was to honor his favorite sportsman, the man we started this show with, Richard Petty. So Brad Daugherty is a co-owner of a NASCAR Cup Series team, JTG Daugherty Racing. His teams have won in the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and Cup Series, including Daytona. So he does analyst work for NASCAR and NBC, a legend on the court, legend in the pit lane. Brad Daugherty is truly one of a kind. But we'll go from some past players to one doing great things right now. I'm talking about Toronto Raptors' Pascal Siakam. Selected late in the first round, number 27 in the 2016 draft. The Cameroon-born Siakam played at New Mexico State. As a freshman, he won WAC Player of the Year. Next season, he put up big numbers and won WAC Player of the Year again. Then make himself eligible for the draft and find his way to the Raptors. He'd bounce between the Raptors and the G League team, the Raptors 905, where he'd help lead that team to a G League title, earning G League Finals MVP along the way. And then, you'd see the work Siakam put into his game so much that he won Most Improved Player in 2019. You might remember that season here in Canada, because that same season, Kawhi Leonard would help lead the Raptors to the team's only franchise, or the only NBA championship in franchise history, sorry. And since then, Siakam's made 2 All-Star games. He's currently in the last year of his 4-year contract. He signed back in 2020, and he's been great for the Raptors. And it's like, what are they going to do? We just saw OG Anunoby get traded. Didn't see that coming with R.J. Barrett going to the Raptors. Big basketball news. If you want more of that, go to my NBA podcast I do every week. Lots of NBA talk. But anyway, back to Siakam. He's a guy you got to have mentioned with this number 43. He's great. Amazing player for the Raptors, and I hope he stays. But other 43s that played in the NBA I might have to mention here, Chris Humphries and Michael Thompson. Humphries was a good role player. He was with the Raptors 1.2, but most remember him for his brief marriage with Kim Kardashian. Michael Thompson, he was part of back-to-back Lakers championship teams in 87 and 88, and his 43 is retired by the University of Minnesota. But a lot of people will recognize him for being the dad of All-Star Klay Thompson and Chicago White Sox outfielder Trace Thompson. So those are some 43s in the basketball court. We'll leave the hardwood, go to the gridiron. First number 43, Steelers legend, Troy Polamalu. Before he was doing Head and Shoulders commercials with Patrick Mahomes, I love little Troy. But he was putting fear in offensive players on the field. An absolute beast at USC. Twice voted All-American, getting honors his junior and senior season. Get drafted 16th overall by the Steelers, and he'd spend his entire career with that heralded franchise. And what a career. He's known for his hard hits, his timely interceptions. He won Defensive Player of the Year in 2010, make 4 first-team All-Pros, 2 second-team All-Pros, 8 Pro Bowls. NFL 2000s All-Decade team had to have him on it. He won 2 Super Bowls with the Steelers, Super Bowl 40 over Seattle, and that Super Bowl 43 wild game with Arizona, one of my favorites to watch. Polamalu is a member of the Steelers all-time team. He's in their Hall of Honor. He's inducted in the College and Pro Football Hall of Fame. Amazing career, Troy Polamalu. I don't know if a lot of his hits would be allowed nowadays, but still, great player to watch on the field. Sticking with the football field, we'll go to a tiny guy that did a lot of damage. I'm talking about Darren Sproles. He didn't become a starter at his alma mater, Kansas State, until his junior season. And as a starter, he'd set 23 school records. So should have started him a little earlier. He's an All-American as well as Big 12, all Big 12. He'd have a good senior season, but his small size had him slip down the fourth round in the draft. The 5'6" running back would get drafted by the Chargers, and he'd have to back up LaDainian Tomlinson and Michael Turner, so he didn't get a lot of time. He'd really show off as a returner, though. In a game against the Colts, Sproles made history by returning a kickoff and a punt for his first 2 NFL touchdowns of his career, becoming the first person to return both in a game since Dante Hall had done it 4 years prior. Another fun guy to watch. But, Sproles would have some good moments with the Chargers before going with the Saints, where he'd set an NFL record that still stands today in 2011 for all-purpose yards in one season, registering 2,696 yards. That includes offensive plays as well as returns on defense or special teams. So after his stint with the Saints, Sproles was acquired by the Eagles, where he would spend the remainder of his career. He was part of that Super Bowl 52 winning team that beat the Patriots. Sproles made 3 Pro Bowls, and he'd make 1 second-team All-Pro. He was named to the Chargers' 50th anniversary team and is a member of the NFL 2010 All-Decade team. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame and his amazing career at Kansas State. Not in the NFL or the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but he's in the college one. And he showed big things come in small packages, and he's still with the Eagles franchise as a personal consultant. So, sticking with the NFL, next number 43, Larry Brown. No, not the longtime NBA coach, but a Washington football great. He'd play at Kansas State, same with Sproles, and not get drafted until the 8th round. The Redskins would take him, as they were called at the time, and Brown would spend his entire career there. He'd have to play under newly arrived coach Vince Lombardi, Green Bay Packer legend, and he noticed this running back was slightly late behind the ball, and so what he did, Vince Lombardi ordered tests, and it was determined that Brown was hearing impaired in 1 year. So Lombardi talked the NFL, got some special approval to put a hearing aid in. What a difference it made when he could actually hear. So that was huge. But then there's another issue. Brown had an issue with fumbling, so Lombardi made him carry a ball everywhere he went. Wherever he walked, even off the field, that ball had to be with him. And I guess it helped a bit. He fixed those issues. He made 4 Pro Bowls, 2 first-team All-Pros, 1 second team. His best year came in 72 when he won NFL Offensive Player of the Year as well as NFL MVP. Amazing career was cut short by injuries, but he was still voted one of the 80 greatest Redskins of all time, and he's in the Commanders' Ring of Fame. His number isn't officially retired by the franchise, but no one has been issued number 43 since his retirement. So I'm hoping with this new ownership group they can get that jersey hung up there while he's still with us, you know? Let's not wait till he passes or anything. Last NFL player I'll mention was one that played safety. I'm talking about Cliff Harris. Harris was only offered a scholarship to Ouachita Baptist University in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, after his father's roommate he convinced head coach Buddy Benson to do it, where he became an accomplished defensive back and a pretty good kick returner. He was named the 2 All-Arkansas Intercollegiate Conference teams. Playing at a small school led him to going undrafted in the NFL, but he got signed by the Dallas Cowboys, and once he was a starter, he never looked back. He and teammate Charlie Waters were one of the best top safety duos in the NFL throughout the 70s. His nickname Captain Crash by his teammates was for his punishing hits and reckless pursuit of ball carriers. He was one of the few Cowboys to play in all 5 Super Bowls they'd make throughout the 70s. He'd surprised the Cowboys when he'd retire in 1980 at the age of 31 to concentrate his oil business ventures, and he's named to the 2 Cowboys, or yeah, he was a member of the 2 Cowboys Super Bowl winning teams, Super Bowl 6 where they defeated the Dolphins and Super Bowl 12 where they defeated the Vikings. Harris, 4 first-team All-Pros, 1 second-team All-Pro, selected the 6 consecutive Pro Bowls, like dominant in the 70s, so we made the NFL All-70s decade team, and he's in the Cowboys Ring of Honor, and of course he has his bust in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Going to hockey, it was I couldn't really think of any. The only one that came was when Nazem Kadri was with the Maple Leafs. He rocked 43 over his time there, but since leaving, he's changed his number, so it doesn't really apply to here. But he did become the first Muslim player to have their name on the cup when he was with the Avalanche there. But yeah, that was the only 43 that came from hockey. If you have any more, let me know. But we go from the Jersey segment into the crazy week we had, starting with the NFL. The season's getting close to finishing. You had the Jets and Browns on Thursday, and after Amari Cooper set that receiving yards record for most yards in a game, he'd missed this one. Didn't seem to bother the Browns, though. Jerome Ford would get a pass from Flacco and score, but the Jets would respond when Simeon would hit Breece Hall for a touchdown. This Browns team can score now, so they'd go right down. Kareem Hunt would score, and the Jets were like, okay, we'll answer. But Simeon did what the Jets have done most of the year, threw an interception, and that would get returned for a touchdown by Ronnie Hickman. And it's kind of all downhill from there, you know. The Jets would continue to struggle. Flacco would throw a pick 6, which made you think, uh-oh, the Jets might come back. But no, he'd bounce back, getting a 50-yard touchdown pass to Ford again, and after another field goal, they'd look good. Browns win. Clinch a playoff spot. First time since 2020 and just the 3rd time since the post-1999 era. Because for a while the Browns were gone. They came back then. And yeah, this is only the 3rd time they're going to the postseason since. Gotta maybe mention Joe Flacco for comeback player of the year. Maybe. We'd have a Saturday game, and yeah, she was a doozy. Lions and Cowboys. Lions would open with a field goal. Then the Cowboys would answer. It looked like Dak should get sacked in his end zone. Perfect defensive call, but the linebacker just whiffed on the tackle. So Dak rolled out, chucked one deep, hitting CeeDee Lamb, who would go 92 yards for the touchdown. And then at halftime, it was pretty cool. I mentioned the Dallas Ring of Honor earlier. Jimmy Johnson is the newest participant, I guess. He was inducted in front of all the legends there. He gave a little "how about them Cowboys," and yeah, it was cool to see. I love seeing that shit. But we'd have more football, and the Lions would go ahead when Montgomery would run in a short touchdown, and then after exchanging some field goals, Cowboys would get a touchdown when Dak would find Brandon Cooks in the end zone. Then after Brandon Aubrey hit a field goal with 1:41 left, Cowboys had a 7-point lead. Excuse me. The Lions would go right down the field, though. Goff would hit Amon-Ra St. Brown. Be a 1-point game with 23 seconds to go, and that's when things got interesting. Lions chose, gutsy Dan Campbell. He's got cojones, so they went for it. Called a really cool play. Goff would hit lineman Taylor Decker in the end zone. Jubilation for Lions fans, and then there was a pause, and then a late flag. They deemed that he was ineligible, that he never declared eligible. But then you see the replay. You see a few linemen approach the ref. And the ref said 70 was eligible, not 68, which is Skipper. And it was he said, she said. It was confusing. I do believe the Lions might have been lined up incorrectly, so it might have been deemed a penalty. But for what they called it, Not a good look. These refs have already been pulled from any playoff games, so it's rough. But anyway, from that on, they're like, okay, penalty. Maybe the Lions will kick the extra point. We'll go to overtime. No, we're still going for two. They'd go for it, but Michael Parsons would be lined up offsides for the Cowboys. So another penalty, a third opportunity. Kick it? No, we're going for two still. And Jared Goff would have probably his worst throw of the game. And they failed to convert, lost the game. Big win for the Cowboys. Controversy galore. We should have been talking about how good this game was, but all we're talking about are these refs and how bad they messed up. I think they need that body cams on straight up, like the police. Then you won't miss anything. There's not going to be anything missed. You'll literally hear what they say, right? But we'll see. Then we went to the Sunday games. Titans, Texans. Will Levis would be back starting at QB for the Titans, and Texans would be getting CJ Stroud back. After the Texans would open the scoring with a field goal, they'd follow it up when C.J. Stroud would hit Brevin Jordan for the touchdown. And the Titans were looking to answer, and Levis would get sacked. It would be big. He'd fumble the ball. Big Sheldon Rankins would scoop it up and score for the Texans and put them up. But in the process, Levis had taken that hit. He was knocked out of the game, and Ryan Tannehill would come back in. Not much would change, and the Texans would take this one 26-3, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Falcons Bears start the game off. It was a snowy one, and Younghoe Koo, very accurate kicker for the Falcons. He'd miss in the elements. Bears would march right down the field where Justin Fields would find DJ Moore, who stayed in the end zone for the touchdown. Falcons would go down the field looking to answer, and I need a sip here. I got a cough. Excuse me. But yeah, Younghoe Koo would miss another one. Usually a really good kicker. And then again, the Bears would go down the field, and Justin Fields would score to double the lead. And coming into the second half, the Falcons had to do something. Heineke would hit Tyler Algier on a screen pass, who would go deep and barely make it in the end zone for their longest score of the season. But the Bears would answer by going right down the field, and Roschon Johnson would run one in to put the Bears back up by 2 touchdowns. Have a few field goals exchanged, and then Taylor Heineke would run one in from 24 yards to make it a 10-point game. Bears would add another field goal, and then after Heineke's third pick of the game, the Bears would really run up the score when Khalil Herbert would run one in. Falcons would bring Desmond Ritter in, but he'd throw a pick as well, and the Bears get the big win. And we'd go to a Dolphins-Ravens matchup. Everyone was pumped for this one. The Dolphins would be missing Mostert and Waddle, so that kind of hurt. Initially, it didn't look like it did, as Tua would find Cedric Wilson for the touchdown. The Ravens would immediately tie it up when Lamar Jackson would hit Justin Hill out of the backfield for the touchdown. Then it looked like the Dolphins would answer again, but Tyreek Hill should have had the touchdown, but bobbled it when he was out of bounds. So they just settled for a field goal, while the Ravens didn't. Lamar Jackson would hit Odell Beckham on an amazing play that got him inside the 5. It was challenged, but that would just give us more time to see how great of a catch it was. And from there they'd where was I on there? Shoot. Lost my spot. Oh, yeah. From there, Gus Edwards would punch it in. Sorry. And then the Dolphins were looking to score again, but would have to settle for a field goal. Field goals that they don't win you games in these big ones, and it would show. The Ravens would get it back, and Lamar would hit Zay Flowers on a 75-yard touchdown play. The Dolphins were looking to score again just before halftime, and Tua would get picked off on a one-handed interception. Beautiful catch. And then on that ensuing drive, the Ravens would go for it on 4th down, and Jackson would find tight end Isaiah Likely, who also made an amazing one-handed catch before getting into the end zone for the score. So big Ravens lead, 28-13 at half, and they'd get the ball in the second half and score again. It was all Ravens. Achane would score to try to keep the Dolphins back in it, but Lamar Jackson kept it rolling, finding big fullback Patrick Ricard for the score. And then they continued to light it up when Melvin Gordon would run one in, making it 49-19. And then the Ravens were like, let's get Lamar out of this game. Tyler Huntley comes in, hits Charlie Collar for the 19-yard touchdown. 56-19, the Ravens win. Bad news for the Dolphins is Bradley Chubb left the game on a cart. He's probably done for the year. Tua left with a shoulder injury, but they're not really worried about it. I guess it's nothing too serious. But did not see the Ravens doing that. Oh, wow. Saints and Bucks in a big NFC South game. The Saints would start it off right, going down the field. Derek Carr would find Juwan Johnson in the end zone. Then the Saints would double their lead when Carr would find Taysom Hill for a touchdown pass. After a few field goals, they're going into halftime looking pretty. Tampa Bay would finally score halfway through the fourth quarter when Baker would hit Trey Palmer on a touchdown, make it 20-7. Then after a Saints field goal, Baker would hit Godwin on a 47-yard touchdown pass. They'd get the 2-point conversion, but it was disallowed because Godwin had stepped out of bounds before coming in and making the catch. They'd go for it again on 2, not get it. It's a 2-possession game. They go an onside kick, not get it. Big win for the Saints, keep their playoff hopes alive. Tough loss for Tampa at home yet. Patriots and Bills, big AFC East battle here, and it started off with a bang. Patriots got the ball, and Jalen Reagor returned the kickoff 98 yards for a touchdown. Then after the Bills got a field goal, they'd intercept Bailey Zappi for the second time and use that turnover to propel a touchdown down the field where they'd set up a tush push, or the Bills version of the tush push, and Josh Allen would score. They'd cause a Pats to fumble. Bills would recover, get a field goal. The Patriots were looking to answer, and Zappi would throw his third pick of the game. This time the former Packer, Rasul Douglas, returned it to the end zone for the pick 6. But then, the Patriots were starting to move the ball and not turn it over, and Zappi showed off his mediocre speed by scampering 17 yards in for the touchdown, making it a 2014 game. But then the Bills would go down the field, use their version of the tush push again. Josh Allen's second rushing touchdown to extend that lead. And then Ezekiel Elliott getting back into the end zone, making it a 1-possession game. But that's as close as the Patriots would get. Huge win for the Bills to keep their playoff hopes alive. Cardinals and Eagles. This did not see this one going the way it would. After the Cardinals opened the game with a field goal, Eagles would respond when Jalen Hurts hit Julio Jones in the touchdown for a touchdown. And then, a little bit of miscommunication between quarterback and receiver. Kyler Murray skied it towards the end zone. No one there except Canadian Sidney Brown, who picked it off and had a lot of work to do, but he'd returned it 99 yards for the touchdown, giving the Eagles a 14-3 lead. The Cardinals were just settling for field goals, and when Hurts would hit Julio Jones for a second touchdown, it was 21-6. Cardinals wouldn't get their first touchdown, so Murray hit Michael Carter for a 6-yard touchdown. And then to follow that up, the Cardinals would go down the field, and Murray would do his little dancing moves before finding James Conner, who made another sick one-handed catch. Everyone was making them on the weekend. Cards would get the 2-point conversion. You'd have a 21-21 game. Jalen Hurts would get another touchdown pass when he'd hit Dallas Goedert, who showed off the fancy footwork. And, the Cardinals would look to respond, and they'd get a 4th down inside the 5. Murray would find Wilson for the touchdown. We're tied at 28. Cardinals tried to be sneaky and do an onside kick, which really backfired because the Eagles were almost in field goal position. The defense of the Cardinals held up, forcing a field goal, so they were down 3 with 2:33 left. But Kyler Murray did his thing. Big play to Greg Dortch would set them up for a James Conner 2-yard touchdown run, and that gave them the lead with 32 seconds left. They'd hold on with Arizona trying to play spoiler in the playoffs here, really messing with the positioning in the playoff race. Panthers, Jaguars, 2 franchises that came into the league at the same time back in the day. No Trevor Lawrence for the Jaguars, and they'd have to go with C.J. Beathard. Not a lot of scoring in this one. You'd have the Jaguars, Brandon McManus hit 3 field goals. It was 9-0 at the break. And then Jaguars would finally score when Travis Etienne busted one loose for 62 yards. And then after another McManus field goal, Etienne would get his second rushing touchdown of the game. Jacksonville shuts out the Panthers. It was ugly, 26-0. And in that trouncing with the Panthers getting beaten up on, they clinched the number 1 pick in the draft, which they had traded to the Bears to move up to draft young. So congrats to the Bears. They won their game and they won the number 1 pick all in 1 week. Good week for them. Raiders and Colts, a big 50-yard passing play by Minshew to Josh Downs would get them deep in the red zone where Jonathan Taylor would score a touchdown. Raiders would get on the board with a field goal before the Colts would get their second score of the game when Minshew would fake the handoff, play action, find Alec Pierce on a 58-yard touchdown. The Raiders would get their first touchdown of the game on the opening drive of the second half when Aiden O'Connell would find Davante Adams for the score. After a few Colts field goals, the Raiders would get one to answer. It'd be a 7-point game. And the Colts would look to make it a 10-point game, but Matt Gay would doink the kick. There was a flag on the play, so luckily they'd get the kick again. Gay would hit the kick. It was a 10-point game with over 3 minutes to go. O'Connell would hit Davante Adams for his second score of the game, and it'd be a 3-point game, but the onside kick wouldn't go well. Colts hold on for a big win there. Rams and Giants, this was a fun one. Rams opened up the scoring with Kyren Williams running one in. Giants would go into their bag of tricks and fake the end-around reverse, whatever you want to call it, but Wan'Dale Robinson would follow his blockers for the score. Rams would go back on top when Matthew Stafford would hit Cooper Kupp for the touchdown. Giants would get a field goal to end the half, and then a big Puka Nacua play in the second half would set up another Kyren rushing touchdown. And the Giants were looking to get back in the game, and they do it in a huge way. Tyrod Taylor skied a deep ball. It was a beautifully thrown ball to Darius Slayton, who caught it perfectly for the 80-yard touchdown. But then, typical Giants season here, Mason Crosby would miss the extra point, so it'd still be a 4-point game. And then after Crosby would make a field goal, it was a 1-point game, but the Rams would go down the field, and Kyren Williams would run in his third touchdown of the game. But now it was Haversick's time to miss an extra point for the Rams, and it'd be a 7-point game still. Giants would stop the Rams, force them to punt, hoping to get a chance to tie, and they'd tie right away. Gunnar Olszewski would return a punt 94 yards for the touchdown. Amazing. The Giants would hit the extra point, but the Rams would get a penalty. So the Giants were like, hey, we get the yards. We'll move up. We'll go for 2. We'll get the lead. And Tyrod Taylor had Saquon wide open, but threw, much like Jared Goff on their 2-point attempt, a bad time to throw one of your worst throws, and he'd miss Saquon. It'd be a 1-point game. The Giants would miraculously get the ball back, and Tyrod Taylor would scramble to make a huge play. So despite everything that happened, Giants are here with a chance to win the game with a field goal. Former Packer Mason Crosby coming up to do it, but he'd miss. Rams hold on to a tight win, cross-country road game to... We'll get more into the playoffs while I wrap this up here, but that was a big win for the Rams. 49ers and Commanders. Commanders were hoping to start Jacoby Brissett, but he picked up a late hamstring injury, and he was inactive, so Sam Howell would get the start again, and after the 49ers opened the scoring with a field goal, Commanders could do nothing on their possession, and San Francisco would score a touchdown this time. Brock Purdy, a little 1-yard pass to a streaking Debo who would scamper into the end zone. And after Joey Sly field goal, Sam Howell would hit Terry McLaurin on a back shoulder pass to tie the game at 10. Late field goal in the first half for the 49ers gave them a lead, and then they'd score early in the second half when Elijah Mitchell punched one in to make it 20-10. Then Brock Purdy made a play where he kept the ball. He was dancing forever, pointing around before hitting Brandon Ayuk. From there, it's all 49ers. They win big, 27-10 over Washington. Seattle and Pittsburgh, this was an interesting one. The Steelers would open the scoring when Jalen Warren ran in an 18-yard touchdown run. Seahawks would go right down the field and answer when Kenneth Texas Walker, Ranger, I brutally made that nickname, Kenneth Walker would run one in from 13 yards out to tie it up. Steelers would get a field goal, and the Seahawks would answer when Geno Smith hit Jackson Smith and Jigba for the touchdown. The Steelers would take the lead again just before halftime when Najee Harris would run one in this time. And after a Seahawks field goal, we were tied at 17. Big play would get Steelers down the Seahawks territory where Najee Harris would take the ball, look to get stopped, but a rugby scrum ensued, and he'd get into the end zone to get back on top. And then Geno Smith held the ball a little too long before throwing it. Before he could, Nick Herbig strip sacked him, recovered his own fumble. Seattle defense held on, just make Pittsburgh kick a field goal. And then the Seahawks would hit a field goal to make it a one-possession game, but Pittsburgh would kill off the game. They'd get enough first downs to run the clock out, and did enough to get the win there. You had the Bengals and Chiefs. Joe Burrow still obviously out in this one. And the Bengals would open the scoring when McPherson would hit his field goal. Chiefs would answer with Pacheco. He'd get a pass from Mahomes in the end zone on a cleverly designed play. One that Tony Romo said the Chiefs used a lot in 2018, so Andy Reid's turning back the clock to try to get things going. Bengals would answer when Joe Mixon would run one in, and then after Mixon put them ahead, Jake Browning would add to that when he'd punch one in. KC would add a few field goals, and Bengals still led 17-13 at half. When the Bengals would get deep in Kansas City territory, you're thinking maybe field goal, but they'd go for it and come up short. It would end up being costly because the Chiefs would go down the field and get a field goal, and they'd be ahead. So, yeah, another Harrison Butker field goal would extend the lead to 22-17 in the fourth. It was definitely a big game for Butker. 6 field goals on the day. So after another one, the Chiefs would be up 8 with 3 minutes left, and Browning gave his team chances, but Kansas City came up big in big moments, getting sacks when they needed to, and they got the win. Chargers, Broncos. This was big because Russell Wilson was benched earlier in the week, where they'd go with Jared Stidham. It was said that Peyton wanted to spark the offense, but yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of stuff there. They're saying there was talks with Wilson earlier in the season about him getting benched because they want to renegotiate his contract. I don't know. It looks like Russell Wilson's time in Denver is coming to an end, as long as Sean Payton's there anyway. But anywho, you'd have Jared Stidham getting the start, while the Chargers went with Easton Stick, not what you were expecting at the beginning of the year. But the Broncos would open the scoring with the field goal, and the Chargers would answer with one of their own. Before Jared Stidham would find little Jordan Humphrey, and he'd go 54 yards for the touchdown. And yeah, after a few field goals were exchanged, the Chargers were looking to score. Eckler would fumble. Broncos recovered, went for it on 4th down. They'd fail to get it, but there'd be a pass interference penalty, and that would lead to another field goal. But yeah, not a lot of excitement in this one. Broncos beat the Chargers in a very, lackluster game. Excuse me. Sunday nighter, you had an NFC North battle, Packers and Vikings, and the Vikings were going with Jaron Hall in this one. They were figuring Nick Mullins, 2 turnover pro, Pasternot's buried down the depth chart. You had a Kirk Cousins appearance. He was blowing the big Viking horn and leading the Skol chant, which was kind of cool, I guess. Him and his kid. But yeah, the Packers would open the scoring with a field goal, and then after a tip ball, Packers would get the interception. Jordan Love would show off a throw off his back foot, perfect to Jaden Reed for the touchdown. The Packers would go for it on 4th down, looking to score. A slightly off throw, but Bo Melton had a chance to catch it. He wouldn't. Vikings would get a field goal off that, but the Packers would respond. Love would run one in. A tough touchdown where he had to reach for it. That would extend their lead, and then after Preston Smith strip-sacked Hall, the Packers would look to score, and Love would find Reed for his 2nd touchdown of the game. And then, after the halftime break, the Vikings, they benched all for Nick Mullins, trying to get something started, but Packers would get it started in the second half when Love would find Melton for the touchdown. He'd make up for his drop earlier. Vikings would get some life in the beginning of the 4th when Jaden Reed had to leave the game after a hit he took. So Toure was taking punts, and he'd muff a punt. Vikings would cover deep in Packers territory where Mullins would find Munt for a touchdown, but that was about all the Vikings could muster up. Big win for the Packers. So going into Week 18, the last game of the regular season, a lot to fill out here still. So in the AFC, the Ravens clinched #1 overall seed in the AFC with their win over the Dolphins. Browns already have the 5th seed locked up. Chiefs won the AFC West with their division. They're 8 straight. Wow, that's insane. 8 straight AFC West divisions. Dolphins already have their playoff spot, but they have a matchup with Buffalo. If the Dolphins beat the Bills, they win the AFC East. However, if the Bills beat the Dolphins drop to the 6th seed, and Buffalo would win the AFC East. But to make things wilder on this crazy Bills season, say the Bills lose. They're not in the playoffs immediately. Say Jacksonville and Pittsburgh win, the Bills actually fall out of the playoffs. So they can go from winning the division to not even being in the playoffs. Excuse me, that's insane. So Jacksonville, if they win, they're in. They secure a division, or they could lose and And the Steelers can win, and Jacksonville could find themselves out. And then you have a game between the Colts and Texans. This is huge because if you win, you're in. You lose, you're out. So this is basically a playoff game. The NFC, the 49ers, they've locked up the number one seed now. And the number two seed could go a few different ways. Right now it belongs to the Cowboys. But if the Cowboys and Eagles both lose, the Lions would move into that spot. The Cowboys lead the NFC East right now, and they secure the division with a win or Eagles loss. The Eagles can take the division if the Cowboys lose and the Eagles win. The Rams clinched the spot with that Seattle loss coinciding with that Rams win. So they're already in. The NFC South is still up for grabs. Tampa Bay locks it up with a win. That's all they got to do. However, if they lose, that opens the door for the winner of the Saints or Falcons to sneak in. If Tampa wins their game, Saints can still make it with a win, but they need the Packers and Seahawks to both lose. My Green Bay just needs to win. They just need to beat Chicago and they're in. And they can move above the Rams if the Rams lose, coinciding with that Packers win. Seattle gets in with a win and a Packers loss. The Vikings need to win and have the Packers, Seahawks, and one of the Saints or Bucks lose. Try not to lose me. Lots of scenarios here. And then there'll be two games Saturday with lots of playoff implications. The Saturday evening game between the Texans and Colts, like I said, that's a playoff game. And the Sunday nighter between Bills and Dolphins, division on the line. Whew, that'll be a doozy. So we'll go from the NFL to the Premier League. There was no Christmas break for the Premier League here. They had games going on around Christmas. Boxing Day had some good matches. Nottingham Forest, they went a goal down to Newcastle after Alexander Isak would score a penalty. But Chris Wood, did his thing, got a hat trick, did what he had to do to get the win. They won 3-1. Tough loss for Newcastle there. Then you'd have another game here between two promoted teams, Luton Town and Sheffield United. In the span of 8 minutes, you'd have a few goals. Sheffield crowd was going bonkers. They were led 2-1. Then the 77th minute, Luton would equalize off an own goal. And then 4 minutes later, they'd have another own goal to go ahead. And that's how it would end. Luton Town, jubilation. Sheffield United went from leading to losing and stay in the Premier League basement. While Luton Town edges closer to leaving the relegation zone. Bournemouth hosted Fulham, and after a first half goal there, they were looking good for Bournemouth, and Solanke would get another goal for Bournemouth, keeping his hot play going, and Sinestro would fire in a lovely one to give them the 3-0 win. Burnley hosted Liverpool, and Liverpool would get a great start. 6 minutes in, Darwin Nunez would get a goal. This game was pretty much dominated by Liverpool. They'd have a few goals disallowed by VAR, but Diogo Jota would get a second goal for the club to put them up 2-0, and that's how they'd take it. You'd have a game of two halves in Manchester between United and Villa. The Villains looked really good. John McGinn scored 22 minutes in, and then 5 minutes later they doubled the lead when Leander Dendoncker would score for a corner kick. Second half started off with a quick Man U goal, but it was disallowed. When Garnacho scored, it was called offsides. 59th minute, Garnacho would score, and this time it would count. Then another 12 minutes would pass, and Garnacho would find his second of the game, tying it up. And Man U kept up the pressure. And then the 82nd minute, Rasmus Højlund finally score a goal for his team in the league, putting Man U up 3-2. And after being down 2-0, they come back to win 3-2. Huge win for Man United, who's been getting a lot of deserved criticism as of late. There's some more midweek action. You had Chelsea hosting Palace in a London derby. Chelsea would go ahead on a Mudryk goal, but Michael Olise would tie it up. Then late in the match, Chelsea would get taken down the box, and Noni Madueke would step up and score from the spot, giving Chelsea the win. Some big late game heroics there. Brentford hosted Wolves, and Brentford hurt themselves in this one. Wolves would go ahead off a Mario Lamina goal, and then some complacency in their own end led to Wang Hee-chan getting the ball and scoring, giving Wolves 2 goals in less than a minute. And then not even a minute later, Brentford would score. So after 16 minutes, you had 3 goals. Wolves up 2-1. Then after another Brentford bad play, they'd go to clear it. It was headed directly from half right to Hee-chan, who would score his second of the game. It was 3-1. More Brentford defensive mishaps would lead to a fourth Wolves goal. Wolves have been playing well lately. Everton hosted Man City, defending champs, and they'd go ahead. Jack Harrison would score, put Everton up 1-0. But in the second half, Phil Foden would unleash a rocket to tie the game. Then a tough handball led to Julian Alvarez converting from the spot, putting up Man City 2-1. Then Jordan Pickford, a bad pass from the keeper, would lead to Bernardo Silva icing the game. Big 3-1 win for Man City. Brighton hosted Tottenham, and this was a goal fest. Ended up 4-2 for Brighton, beating Tottenham. Not a good look for Tottenham. They were down 4-0 in 1 point, but they get two late goals, one by Velez, his first goal in the Premier League, and one by Ben Davies. But great win for Brighton there. Two of their goals were penalties, but hey, doesn't matter how they score. Arsenal hosted my West Ham. See the jersey here? In another London derby, West Ham would lead after 13 minutes when it looked to go out of play, but Jared Bowen would save it and Souček would score. And then 10 minutes in the second half, former Arsenal defender Konstantino Mavropanos would score a thumping header. And then West Ham former captain Declan Rice would foul Emerson in the box, and Benrahma would take the penalty, but it was stopped by the keeper. But it didn't matter. 2-0 win for West Ham. Great. And you're like, okay, that's it for the Prem. But no, there are weekend matches too. Like I said, no rest for these guys. You had Luton Town and Chelsea both coming off midweek wins, and a bad Luton pass would lead Palmer to firing one in the net. And then later in the half, when Luton was putting pressure on, Chelsea would go on the counterattack, and Madueke, there, I got his name right there, would score to make it 2-0. And in the second half, Palmer would get his second to make it 3-0. And then the 80th minute, Luton Town decided to wake up. They'd put some pressure on. Former Chelsea man Barkley would score. And then they'd get another goal. But Chelsea would escape with the 3-2 win despite that late pressure. Man City faced basement dwellers Sheffield United. Dominated possession, 81% to 19. Despite that game, it was just a 2-0 win. It took goals from Rodri and Julian Alvarez to win that. Palace hosted Brentford. 2 minutes in, Brentford went up 1-0. You're like, wow, this is going to be a beatdown for Brentford. But it was all Palace from there. Michael Olise would continue his great play with a brace, as they would get a goal as well for that comeback win for them. Wolves hosted Everton, and this was a bit of a scramble to start. Max Kilman would put it in after Pickford saved it. It was his first goal in 2 years, and he'd celebrate by grabbing a Lamina jersey. His teammate's father has just passed away, so he grabbed his jersey to hold it up in solidarity. You gotta love that. Then, more goals from Wolves. Cunha would get one, and former West Ham defender Craig Dawson looked like a striker with his shot as Wolves won 3-0. Villa would be involved with another wild game. They were hosting Burnley, and Villa would go ahead 20 minutes in when Bailey would score, but Burnley would immediately answer with Amdouni tying it up. And then when Villa would go on the attack, Ollie Watkins would find Moussa Diaby to put them up again. And then Burnley would get a second yellow when Sander Berg would tug a jersey, get a red card. Burnley would go a man down, but despite being a man down, a long ball would get picked up by Lyle Foster, would blast it in the net. You'd have a tie game at 2, but they couldn't hold on. Villa would go on the attack and get pulled down in the box, and after standing there, I don't know if his controller was unplugged, but Douglas Luiz was just staring at the ball. He'd finally take the penalty, he'd score, give Villa the 3-2 win, and yeah, thrilling game that was. Fulham would host Arsenal in Arsenal's second back-to-back London derby. Gunners would go ahead 5 minutes into the game when Bukayo Saka would score. And then the 29th minute, Raul Jimenez would equalize. And in the second half, it looked like a pinball machine was going off. The ball would landed to Cordova Reed, who would score. Fulham were up 2-1. Arsenal put on pressure but could not equalize. Fulham get the huge win. Title hopefuls Arsenal end their calendar year of 2023 with back-to-back losses to London sides. Not what they were looking for. Tottenham, they've been slumping. They hosted a hot Bournemouth team and was looking to cool them off. A bad pass, tons of bad passes from the back this week here. But a bad pass from the Bournemouth keeper led to Sarr putting Tottenham up only 9 minutes into the game. Then the second half, Tottenham would get 2 goals in less than 10 minutes. Son would score and Richarlison would score as well. The 84th minute, substitute Alex Scott would get a consolation goal for Bournemouth, but much needed win for Tottenham there. Liverpool hosted Newcastle on New Year's Day as the only Premier League match that day. Somehow we did not get a goal in the first half. Luis Diaz had a goal disallowed by VAR. Then he was later pulled down in the box, and Mo Salah had a penalty, but Martin Dubravka made a huge save to stop the Egyptian. But the second half, we'd have goal city. Salah put Liverpool ahead. Isaac would answer for Newcastle not even 5 minutes later. Then Liverpool would get 2 goals in 4 minutes. First Curtis Jones and then Cody Gakpo. Then not even 3 minutes after Gakpo's goal, Sven Botman would hit a powerful header and it was 3-2. You're like, wow, Newcastle's coming back. But then 5 minutes later, Liverpool would get taken down in the box again. And you knew Salah wasn't going to miss twice. Big 4-2 win. So Liverpool beat Newcastle. And this Newcastle team, they're struggling. They've won just one in their last 8 in all competitions and lost 3 straight in the league. Eddie Howe, that collar's getting a little tight. Lots of pressure right now. The very wealthy club are underachieving and are very far down in the table from those European spots. My West Ham will be playing Brighton a few hours after this podcast airs. So come on, West Ham, come on. Hopefully we can get the win there. We've been playing well, so we don't want to slump. We want to ride this momentum. So yeah, with fixtures popping up all over the place, not all the teams are on even games, but let's still look at the table here. Liverpool sit at the top of the Premier League, 3-point lead over Aston Villa. Man City's 2 points behind Villa, but they have, like I said, a game in hand on the Citizens there. Arsenal round out the top four despite those 2 consecutive losses. The Serie A, there was some footy played outside the UK this past weekend. The Serie A had some fixtures on Friday and Saturday. Fiorentina got a late goal by Luca Ranieri to take down Torino. Lazio hosted Frosinone in an exciting one, and after a scoreless first half, the visitors would go ahead when Sule would convert from the spot, put Frosinone up. But Lazio would storm back 3 goals in a 14-minute span. 2 in 2 minutes. Castellanos would score a nice one. Gustav Isaacson would get his first with the club before Patrick put the game out of reach. Napoli and Monza would play to a scoreless draw. Genoa would hold Inter to a 1-1 draw. Atalanta beat Lecce. Salernitana surprised Verona, both 1-0 results. Udinese would host Bologna and humble the informed club. Everyone's been talking Bologna, but they weren't feeling it with Udinese. American Christian Pulisic would get the lone goal in AC Milan's win over Sassuolo. Adrian Rabiot's early second half goal would prove to be the difference in Juventus' big win over Roma. And Cagliari drew with Empoli in a scoreless draw. So after 18 matches, Inter Milan still sit atop the Serie A. Juventus in second place is 2 points behind them. AC Milan are 7 points behind Juventus in the third spot. And Fiorentina 2 points behind AC Milan for fourth. Last year's champions, Napoli, way down. They're even on points with Roma and sit in 8th place. La Liga had a little break, but there's some top division footy returning to Spain this week. They'll be going on today, tomorrow, and Thursday. In Italy, some Coppa Italia games during the week, followed by some Serie A fixtures on the weekend. And in Germany and France, there's no fixtures until the weekend of January 13th, 14th. One last footy mention, the lower tier divisions in the UK went down on New Year's Day, and there was a pretty wild game between Plymouth Argyle and Watford. Back and forth game ended 3-3, but a beautiful goal by Canadian Ismail Kone. He played at CF Montreal in the MLS previously, but a must-see for sure. And you know we got to shout out Canadians playing abroad on this show. And hey, shout out to the guys at Wrexham. They beat Barrow 4-1 in their match. We'll leave the footy pitch to the college football field. Finally got our semifinal matchups. They went down New Year's Day. First game was a doozy, Michigan and Alabama, the Rose Bowl. Alabama would draw first blood when McClellan would run in a long one, but Michigan would respond when quarterback J.J. McCarthy would find Blake Corum for the score. McCarthy would get a second TD of the game when he'd find Tyler Morris, and they'd miss the extra point with a Bama field goal. We had a 3-point game. McClellan would run his second score of the game, and after another Bama field goal, Bama was up 7 with 5 to go. Michigan would go on a clutch drive, which was capped off with McCarthy's third touchdown of the game, finding Roman Wilson for the score, and we'd go to overtime. Blake Corum had a great run to get into the end zone, and they were up. Alabama was looking to answer as you have to in overtime. They'd find Jermaine Burton, who made a good play to get him near the goal line, but man, his leg got rolled up. He'd have to leave the game. Hopefully he's okay. But he'd come down the fourth and goal, and Bama quarterback Jalen Milroe, they'd call a quarterback draw. It had no chance. It wasn't even close. Questionable call? I don't know. Big win for Michigan. They got that monkey off their back, snapping a 7 bowl game losing streak. They're off to the national championship in Houston. Yeah, brutal way for Bama to get out of that one. How would you follow that up? Sugar Bowl between Texas and Washington. Lots of scoring in this one. Dylan Johnson touchdown would have the Huskies ahead. The Longhorns would answer with a rush of their own with Jaden Blue would score. Then the second frame, Dylan Johnson got his second touchdown of the game to go back ahead. But then again, Texas would answer. This time Byron Murphy punching one in. We'd finally have a throwing score when Michael Penix would find Jalen Polk on a 29-yard score with under 90 seconds to go in the first half. But C.J. Baxter would run one in with 17 seconds left in the first half. We had a 21-21 game. Penix would get his second touchdown of the game when he'd find Jalen McMillan for the score. And after a few field goals, Quinn Ewers would find Adonai Mitchell for the touchdown, and it was 34-28 Huskies. Two teams would exchange field goals, and Texas would have a late push, but Washington holds on. They will face Michigan for the national championship. That game will go down Monday, January 8th. I mean, they were ranked 1 and 2, so this is what we should want, but man, we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see who takes home the national championship. Those were the great bowl games. However, there were tons of scattered bowl games all over. Many of the games didn't feature their star players as they, don't want to get hurt for an exhibition bowl game, especially if you want to go to the NFL. So they might need to change something about that to get people at these games, but there still were people at these games. You'd have Tennessee thrashing Iowa in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Oregon took down undefeated Liberty team in the Fiesta Bowl. They crushed Liberty 45-6. And speaking of beatdowns, former number 1 team in the country until they lost to Bama in the last game of the year, Georgia, they obliterated Florida State 63-3. So I don't think Florida State should have had that 4th spot. But they didn't play a lot of their guys. It was an ugly game. You had Georgia players going on Instagram Live during the game. The ReliaQuest Bowl, I don't even know what that is, but that was probably one of the better ones. Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels didn't suit up for LSU. No worries. Garrett Nussmeier get his first ever start, go down the field and hit Brian Thompson for the winning touchdown to give the Tigers the win, but way too many bowls. I don't even know what's going on there. Quick MLB mention, Kevin Kiermaier inked a 1-year, $10.5 million deal to stay with the Toronto Blue Jays, so it's good to have the Golden Glove winner come back. NHL, wow, some really fun games. Did you catch that Winter Classic game New Year's Day? That looked really cool in Seattle. The Kraken shut out the defending champ Golden Knights. Kraken have been doing pretty well of late too, winning 5 in a row, including that win outside. Oilers looking hot too, also on a 5-game winning streak, beating some really good teams along the way, like the Kings and the Rangers, and some not so good teams like the Sharks and the Ducks. Regardless, they're looking like the team we expect them to be. This is what you expect out of the Oilers. And top of the West, pretty bunch right now. Canucks and Golden Knights are tied on points in the Pacific. Avalanche, Jets, and Stars are still battling it out at the top of the Central. All 3 of those teams I just mentioned are all on 2-game winning streaks. I mentioned how bad the Sharks were earlier. They're in the basement of the Western Conference, not looking too great. Out east, Panthers are on a little bit of a winning streak while the Leafs are slumping. Panthers are winners of 4 straight and have slithered their way to just 4 back of the Atlantic leading Boston Bruins. This 3-game losing streak of the Leafs has looked kind of brutal, losing to the Sens and that goal-filled nightmare against the Blue Jackets. That game in Columbus was the final nail in the coffin for goaltender Ilya Samsonov. Toronto goaltender was placed on waivers, and it's looking like they're going with Martin Jones for now to be the guy. East is still very tight. The Rangers still have a decent lead in the Metropolitan, but the Hurricanes have moved up with their current 3-game winning streak. You have the Hurricanes at 44, the Penguins at 40, and there are 6 teams in between there. That's amazing how tight that division is right now. You gotta love it. Not loving my Flyers 2-game losing skid right now, but we'll bounce back. But you don't want to be on too big of a losing streak in that division. You'll drop pretty low. But we'll go to some individual stats. Nikita Kucherov still leading the league in points with the Lightning. He's at 61. Nathan McKinnon of the Avalanche just three behind him. Toronto's Austin Matthews continues to lead the league in goals at 29. Kucherov just behind him at 26. Vegas's Aiden Hill, he's still tops of the leaderboards for a lot of marks here, but he's been out with injuries. So behind him in goals against average, you have LA's Cam Talbot. Washington's Charlie Lindgren is just behind him in save percentage. And Colorado's Alexander Georgiev leads the league in wins with 19. Connor Bedard is continuing to lead the rookie stats with the Blackhawks there. He has 33 points on the season. 15 goals, 18 assists, and he scored his first overtime winner this past week at home against the Jets. The Red Sea kind of parted, and he just went up and sniped at home. First of many, I imagine. Have to do a big shout out here. The Professional Women's Hockey League made its debut New Year's Day. We had a matchup between New York and Toronto. Halfway through the first period, New York would win an attacking face-off, and Ella Shelton would take a point shot to foul the back of the net, giving her the first goal in the PWHL history. The goal was assisted by Alex Carpenter. And the second period would have no goals, but a 3-goal onslaught from New York in the third would clinch the 4-0 win in the first ever game. Corrine Schroeder picked up her first ever shutout in PWHL history, his first game. Lots of good hitting. It was a pretty exciting game. And, let's support this PWHL. A lot of good women hockey players out there. It's good they have their own league here. We'll go from that to college basketball. You had some wild games. Oklahoma beat up Central Arkansas. Maryland and Texas Tech picked up some big wins. Some good West Coast battles with Oregon having a great first half to beat USC, and UCLA won a close one over Oregon State. Purdue, Arizona, Kentucky, Illinois, UNC all look good on their wins. San Diego State beat Gonzaga. Some other impressive wins were Colorado State, Clemson, Texas, Miami, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. And on the weekend, you had some wild games. Kansas took down Wichita State. BYU, Duke, and Memphis won their games. Marquette and Creighton had a good battle of ranked teams there. Houston and James Madison both stayed undefeated with their wins. Number 7, Florida Atlantic, surprised by Florida Gulf Coast in their game, only their third loss of the season. Then you had some good battles of teams outside the top 25. Syracuse beating Pittsburgh. Notre Dame stepped up to take down Virginia. Rutgers was almost shocked by 2 wins Stonehill, but pulled it out, a 1-point win. Appalachian State, UMass, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, George Mason, Dayton, Georgia, Missouri, Arkansas, Ohio State, all looking good in their wins. Some down to the wire games. You had Davidson squeaking over Ohio. Princeton stayed at 1 loss on the season when they took down Delaware. St. Bonaventure needed a last-second shot to beat Akron. And a few shocking results were Bronny James USC just getting trounced by Oregon State. Probably the best Bronny's looked at his time at USC, though. He had a pretty good game in that big loss. Then you had a big ACC battle, Wake Forest beating down Virginia Tech. Sunday, you had the Pac-12 matchups, and the biggest one was Stanford beating up on Arizona. This Arizona team wants to win a championship. You had the freshmen for Stanford stepping up. Kanan Carlisle, 28 points, 8 boards off the bench. Remember Peja Stojakovic, sharpshooter for the Kings? His son Andre plays at Stanford. He threw in 16 off the bench. Huge upset win. Colorado narrowly got a victory over Washington State. Just some big games all over college there. On the women's side, you had Texas thumping Jackson State by 45, but there was someone missing. Tori Harmon wasn't in the game. It was announced to start Tori ACL in practice, and she's done for the year. You hate injuries. I hate them. You had Miami, Duke, Florida Gulf Coast, and DePaul picking up big wins. Georgetown picked up a close win. Oregon State stayed undefeated by beating up on Oregon State. The Seminoles and Georgia Tech had an ACC bout, and the Seminoles easily took that. Stanford took care of Cal in a Pac-12 matchup, and Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Princeton picked up wins. On the weekend, South Carolina, they continue to look like the best team in college. Some good games, had some undefeated teams lose their first game. UCLA would stay undefeated when they beat rivals USC. A battle of Texas had 2 undefeated teams. Baylor beat up on Texas by 6 to remain undefeated. The Longhorns were missing Harmon in that one for sure. LSU looked dominant over Jacksonville. Angel Reese at 17 and 20. Teammate Anissa Morrow had a double-double as well with 20 and 10. And Flauja Johnson would throw in 20 of her own. Some other big conference games: Colorado beating Utah, Kansas State beating Cincinnati, and Michigan beating rivals Ohio State. Some other Big 12 games: at TCU staying undefeated, beating a tough BYU team, and West Virginia staying undefeated, beating a tough Kansas team. Staying in the Big 12, Texas Tech beat Houston. And don't forget about Caitlin Clark in Iowa. She had 35 points and 10 dimes in a Big 10 win over Minnesota. New Year's Eve had some pretty big games. Some seeded teams: UConn thumped Marquette by 31. Indiana stayed at one loss on the season with a conference win. Florida State, Duke, Virginia Tech, and UNC each picked up wins in the ACC. Another big ACC battle at Notre Dame and Syracuse, which went down to the wire, but the Orange would emerge the winners. Stanford won their game to stay at one loss in the season. Maryland and Nebraska had a big dogfight in a Big Ten matchup where the Cornhuskers would win. Auburn, Alabama, and Texas A&M all picked up one-sided wins. The Beavers beat the Ducks in the Battle of the Oregon. So Oregon State stayed undefeated with their win. NC State stayed undefeated with a win over Virginia. And staying in the ACC, Louisville won a close one over Miami. So, yeah, lots of basketball talk there in college. If you want NBA, hop over to my page and check out the weekly recap. One last mention in the sports week: The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and business partner Danny Garcia announced the USFL and XFL are combining to create the UFL, the United Football League. There'll be two conferences: the USFL and XFL conferences. In the USFL, you have the Birmingham Stallions, coached by Skip Holtz; the Houston Roughnecks, coached by Curtis Johnson; the Memphis Showboats, coached by John DeFilippo; and the Michigan Panthers, coached by Mike Nolan. The XFL conference features the Arlington Renegades, coached by Bob Stoops; the DC Defenders, coached by Reggie Barlow; San Antonio Brahmas, coached by Wade Phillips. Yeah, remember Wade Phillips? And the St. Louis Battlehawks, coached by Anthony Beck. So, yeah, some exciting spring football to look forward to. But that's the wild week of sports. We're going long here, but let's jump into the short. It was recently New Year's. That's why this episode's released a day later. Sorry about that. But Happy New Year's. Let's see what 2024 has in store for us. The celebrations bringing in the new year. I had to think about a crazy year. This year was pretty tame. The wife and I were laying in bed, actually, when midnight came. Our cat Norma wasn't too far away. You can hear her scratching at the door right now. But it was nice. But this throwback I'm going to was not so nice. We're going the time machine, the 2004 and the 2005. This is crazy. Yeah, like 20 years ago. I'm old. Don't age shame me here. But yeah, my parents were looking after my sister's house in Ajax, Ontario, while my sister was working in India. I was living with my Oma in Warman, finishing my grade 12 year in high school. So yeah, I wanted to see my parents around Christmas time, so I flew out to Toronto. As a teenager, you want to be away from your parents, but you also miss them if you don't live with them. So it was tough. So yeah, I went out there, had a great visit, wonderful time. We had to bring another sister of mine down to the States for some reason, I forget, but she needed a ride there. And while down there, saw the cheapness of beer. Luckily, my family pulled for me and grabbed me a 30-pack of Budweiser. I was super pumped. As a grade 12 kid, you're like, damn, that's awesome. But yeah, I was all about partying, obviously a grade 12 kid, and I feel bad doing this now, but like December 31st, New Year's Eve, that was my father's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. But that was the day I was flying back from Toronto to Warman, or to Saskatoon, party with the crew. And yeah, I did what anyone would do. I had a few beer there, but I had 28 beer left, so I filled up my suitcase with them, hiding these beer. I'm glad nothing exploded, but I got it back, underage dude bringing his beer from Ontario to Saskatchewan, but it worked out. The only problem was I decided to drink all that beer that night. Yeah, 28 beer for a grade 12 dumbass, but yeah, it had some highs and lows, mostly lows, I guess. I don't recall a lot of the highlights, or lowlights, whatever you want to call them. But a few that jump out was me sitting buck naked on the toilet. My man Brad, you've seen Brad on this show. He had a group of ladies with him, which seems like a very far-fetched thing, but it was going on here, and he bumped the door open, and there I was. I turned to look, just buck naked. Like, they screamed, like, what is going on here? Can't blame them from screaming. They shut the door and move on. I don't remember what happened really from there, but I must have got clothed up, and I went up to Chris, because it was at Chris's house, and I was like, I gotta go. And he's like, man, it's not even New Year's. And I'm like, I gotta go. So I like walked home. Good thing it was like a block and a half away. And much like this New Year's, except I was laying nicely in bed with my wife this New Year's. Back then, I was laying on my face in the basement floor. Didn't even make it to New Year's. I woke up at I don't know what time, probably to throw up. But yeah, not the best way to go into the year. And the next day, I went over to Chris's to see like what's up, how the rest of the party went. And he's like, "Get in there." In the bathroom, I guess I puked everywhere, and like I had ketchup chips, so I was making it rain vomit all up in there. So yeah, I had to clean that up a bit. Not my ideal moment, but yeah, I had 28 beer. What do you expect? Maybe not an ideal thing to do as a teenager, but oh my god, maybe that's why I'm sore some days. That this contributed. But it's pretty wild to think that I was that fucking crazy on December 31st, and this past December 31st that just happened marks 1 year of me not having alcohol. I still can't believe that shit. But there we are. I'm not gonna shit or shame on alcohol. It helped inspire this podcast. But yeah, kudos to me. Shout outs. Don't want to toot my own horn, but beep beep. Anywho, thanks for coming out, guys. Happy New Year's 2024. This is your year. Take it by the horns and do what you got to do with those set horns. I ruined that one too. But it's episode 43 in the books. Thanks for coming out. Sports and shorts of sorts. My name's Rennie Riquet. Happy New Year. Rencity out.